Hey there, welcome to Sequentially Yours, Initially Mine. This is a show where we look over this week's number one comics and decide which ones you should pick up and which ones you should avoid like the plague. And speaking of the plague, that is the reason why I am coming to you a little bit late this week. I got very, very sick over the course of the week, and I apologize. I just did not have it in me to actually record this, but I'm recording now. You might also notice that I've got a new lighting setup here, so I'm still getting used to that, but please just bear with us and everything will get worked out in time. In the meantime, let's start jumping into this week's number ones. Insufferable, On the Road. Alright, I have reviewed Insufferable before. It's from Mark Waid and, Peter Krause. As writers, the art is and artist, yeah. Writers, artists, storytellers, Mark Waid and Peter Krause. Colorist, Nolan Woodard. This is a continuation of the Insufferable series, which is essentially about a superhero team that was father and son until the son decided to out himself and therefore his father and become a bit of a celebrity. Now he's lost all of his money and this, that, and the next thing. I love Mark Waid's work. I really do, but I cannot get into Insufferable. I just don't like it. These characters are not interesting to me. They're fairly stock, which is not what I expect from Waid, but it's, occasionally it happens. The mystery itself just isn't working. It reads a lot like not a noir mystery, but more like a Hyacinth type thing. And at least in this case, at least in On the Road, it's got that island flair and you're introduced to a lot of kooky characters and this, that, it didn't work for me. So yeah, I wouldn't bother with Insufferable. It's not the best of Waid's work. If you really want some Mark Waid, you can look at some of his classics, like Kingdom Come, or, quite frankly, pick up Archie. Archie's worth reading. Insufferable, not worth your time. You'll excuse me, I'm still a little sick, that's why my voice isn't quite there. I'm not hitting any high notes lately, so please excuse me if I'm sniffling here or making noises. That's just side effect here, but hopefully next week I'll be better. Alright, next one on the list. Second Sight. And again, we're looking at Aftershock Comics, who I mentioned last week, in that they're kind of using their licensed properties in order to push some of their more unique stuff. That being said, their unique stuff, the unique stuff coming out of Aftershock, including Super Zero from Jimmy Palmiotti or Insects from Marguerite Bennett, are excellent. Second Sight is okay. It's not terrible. The writing from David Hine makes it a little bit interesting, and I'm kind of invested in these characters. I'd like to sort of know where it's going, but I'm not sure if I'd like to know that much that in a month I'm going to care about it. The art from Alberto Ponticelli is at times disturbing in a good way, and I respect that, but at other times is just not particularly... It doesn't stand out much. So much so that I really can't tell the difference between flashbacks of one of the main characters and the killer. They look very, very similar to the point that I'm not sure, maybe the murders are happening in the past and our main character was the killer, but isn't... What? It's really hard. It's really hard for me to follow because of those art choices. It gives you enough to work with, and I will say that the twist at the end is actually really interesting. I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but it was an interesting twist. It might be worth checking out. If you like Dexter, you might like this. If you like police procedurals with strange extra people, you might like this. Otherwise, I would avoid it. Alright, King's Road. King's Road has a lot of interesting ideas in it, but But I feel like in 48 pages of a first story, it didn't really go anywhere. It spent so much time laying down mystery that it had no chance for us to really grasp onto these characters. Essentially, the main character appears to be a young teenage girl. At least she's the one who I was most immediately able to grasp onto and start to like. She has a younger brother, and her parents, or at the very least her father, is in fact a fairy from the land of fairy who has been lying to them their entire lives and pretending that he's something else because he's in hiding from these creatures that have just now come to kill him and his family. Because the king of this fairyland is dead, thanks to an evil queen. And his sister, who could have taken the throne in his place, was turned into a dog. There's a lot of interesting ways that they go about kind of integrating the fairy ideas with common ideas and using glamours to hide themselves, but not really, and kind of pointing out how this girl has been protected her entire life without realizing it, and how kind of really bad her parents have been about lying about this because it just, for example, they say they're from England, they don't have accents, and they don't really know much about England. Things like that. That being said, though, with the exception of the basic idea, it takes us 48 pages of being thrown these concepts without any of them coming to any sort of point. And you need at least one or two of the concepts that you're throwing out your first issue to culminate in some way or to have a specific impact on the story. And considering it took that long, I can't imagine in a regular-sized issue that we're going to get much more than a serial over and over again, just waiting for something to happen. So, again, lots of interesting ideas, but I'm not sure that I'm willing to invest in this for the long haul. Alright, from Vertigo Comics, The Dark and Bloody, #1. This was almost my favorite for the week, and that's surprising because I would think that something called The Dark and Bloody would not appeal to my personal tastes. Again, I've said this before, I will say it again. If your tastes are different, great, I respect that, and you are totally okay to like anything you like, which is why I talk about these in detail. That being said, The Dark and Bloody was surprisingly good, and mostly because I like the main character. He's a he's a POW. No, he's not a POW, but he's a veteran. He's a bit of a redneck. He makes illegal moonshine and sells it out of a still. That being said, though, he's a fairly well-rounded character, especially for a first issue. We're given a lot of information about him, and we see him behaving in ways that I believe are very identifiably human. I didn't have a lot of hopes for this. Again, not only the title, but within 2 pages there was dog drowning. Puppy drowning, specifically. But still, I managed to really buy into this character. I want to see where he goes, and I believe that he is a real person. I think that this is supposed to be a horror comic since it has so many elements of, sort of monster story bits to it. That being said, though, it wasn't horrible in the first issue. It didn't frighten me at all. So as a horror comic, or as a potential horror comic, it doesn't quite work. As something else, it draws a lot from genre tropes that seem outside of its purview. Harrow County managed to at least creep me out a little bit by issue 1. This didn't quite do it, but it gave me people that I like more. And so, yeah, this was almost my #1 just because I like this main character. I like seeing him be fairly average. He's not a great father, he's not a bad father, he's not a great husband, he's not a bad husband. He's sort of trying his best to make what he can of his life, and I respect that. And I want to see what happens to him because I want to believe that he can succeed. I want to believe that he can win because he is so likable. All right, so let's get to number one for the week, shall we? The number one for this week is Jonesy. This is probably not a huge surprise considering that it was very much anticipated and pushed, but it's not a bad book. It's from Boom Studios. It has its flaws, a lot of them. I'm not going to lie and say that this is a perfect story. This was sort of a meh week overall. Nothing really got me excited, but Jonesy certainly has its heart. And that's really what this is about. It's about heart. Jonesy as a character is, again, believable for somebody her age, specifically in the sense that she makes mountains out of molehills, and everything is far more dramatic than, adults might see it as. But kids definitely try to over-dramatize their lives and make them more exciting, and that's what's happening here, and I like that. Jonesy herself is drastically flawed as a person, but again, in a good way, in ways that make her relatable. I can understand where she's coming from. And more to the point, I also understand where her rival is coming from. And the two of them eventually kind of start to see eye to eye, which I kind of liked as well. Yes, she has a special power, a superpower type thing. That being said, I didn't see a lot of mentions of it in the promotional material leading up to this, and it doesn't come up until about halfway through the book, and at first you think she might be crazy. That being said, though, it's handled well. I'd like to see where it goes, especially since this is not a great power, great responsibility character. This is a great power, what can I do with it character. And I think that she can learn a lot from it. Probably my biggest problem with it is that, like Luna the Vampire, it relies a little too heavily on internet culture in order to drive its humor and in order to drive its story and its characters. Internet culture's great. I work on the internet in more ways than one. Trust me, guys, I am not against internet culture. I've used the word totes much to my English major friends. They'll hate that one too. Chagrin. I understand acronyms. I know what's going on. But when you are relying on that for a comic book, what you end up doing is seriously dating your comic book. And the thing with Jonesy is that as a character, she could be timeless. This character, for the most part, does not exhibit any traits that are specifically 2016 other than this reliance on this humor. And I think that, if they want this character to continue on and to become a thing, which, considering, again, the way that they've been promoting her, I think that was the idea, then they've really got to rein those back and look for something a little bit more timeless, a little bit less specifically grounded in where we are right now. Again, I think it's possible. I think it's possible without a dramatic character re-envisioning, especially this early. But I hope that they do it, because otherwise this is going to start to wear on me as much as I like it. Okay, I had one more for this week, but my local comic shop kind of accidentally gave me a preview for a book that's not coming out until April. I will review it come April, and I will say right now that it looks pretty good, but I'm going to wait until it comes out, because I feel it would be unfair to tell you guys how much I actually did enjoy this book, probably more than anything else here, but you can't go out and buy it. So, yeah. When it comes out, I promise I will tell, and I will reference back to this and tell you that this was the book. But for now, please just kind of bear with me on that. Otherwise, that was this week's number ones. Again, kind of meh overall, but there's stuff in there worth reading. And if anything sounds like it particularly would fit your interests, I say go for it. Give it a shot. You never know, and it's a $4 investment. If you can afford that, do it. All right, because I don't know what you're going to like, but these opinions were initially mine. Take care.